What is up, entrepreneurs? You are tuned into the Non-Corporate Network. You are watching Entreprenews, a show where Dustin and I debate the top 6 trending small business stories. We each give our take. I defeat him. I make quick work of him. And then we continue on with our day. That about sum it up, Dustin?
Yeah, a couple little details that were a little incorrect, but we all know what they are. But until then.
Oh, gosh. You want to tell them a little bit about the mission with Non-Corporate Network before we dive in?
Non-Corporate Network. So we want to roll out a channel that encompasses everything business. So we'll have different shows come on board. We have Entreprenews, anything that's related to finance, entrepreneurship. The whole goal is to really bring business news and content in a new way.
We're decentralizing CNN and CNBC, making something funner to watch. And without further ado, I'm about ready to get started.
Yeah.
First story here. So Asia will lead the post-COVID-19 recovery in the tech sector. It was reported that over 80% of businesses are now open. They're taking people's temperature, going into the stores. They are now doing in-person events. Over 1,000 people showing up to these events where they're screening you, making you sit 6 feet apart. They're doing all sorts of tests when you walk in, temperature tests and all that good stuff. So, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how far behind the U.S. is compared to South Korea, compared to Canada, compared to Taiwan. These countries seem to be mobilizing quick to get back to normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, things are definitely opening up. There has been a little bit of downfall in terms of places closing back up. Right. The big difference here is this is kind of the cost of having, land of the free. Those other countries, it's the government can tell you what to do and you have to do it. Where, I mean, there's ongoing debates. I mean, This is such a polarizing thing, whether we should be wearing masks, shouldn't be wearing masks, closing down or not closing down, looking at just the wrong numbers. I mean, that is one of the downfalls. But I think, from an economic standpoint, I mean, the jobs numbers, came out, we'll talk about later, that look good. Stock market's looking good. I mean, in terms of things opening up and financials, I mean, things are looking good. Whether we can sustain that, time will tell. But I mean, what are your thoughts? You think America is going to follow suit or?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. The problem is that we already went through wave 1 and didn't really do well back in quarantine, back business closed for the second round of this. So I think we need to do a better job of just enforcing the policies. I mean, it doesn't have to be like I'm going to arrest you if you're on the street not wearing a mask, but the temperature checks, things like this. I know South Korea does. If you're doing a quarantine, like you come into the country and you have to quarantine, they're sending people boxes of food that'll last them for 14 days. So they're just inventing ways to kind of hold people accountable and make it so that this isn't a huge inconvenience if you have to quarantine, if you have to go into a store, but also protecting people from spreading this. So, I mean, I think it's really just a matter of enforcing the rules. And although, we're not a communist country, I think that, there's still some things that, business owners and thought leaders need to get behind. If we can enforce those rules, I don't see a reason why we couldn't open back up, start having more in-person events. Again, if both people are wearing a mask, the spread is like, it's so minute, the amount that is supposed to be spread, like 2% chance or something. So,
Yeah, it's definitely a test of, how strong the land of the free really is. Something my wife brought up that, it's good is, if we go through this, wear masks, it might be inconvenient, but if it works, sweet. If it doesn't work, then we know that we don't need masks and then we can get on with that conversation. But I think it'll just take some unity, which is, what created this country. And so only time will tell.
That's very true. Getting into our next story. Influencers are forming their own lobbying group. It's called the American Influencer Council, comprised of TikTok and Instagram stars in an effort to pretty much unionize influencers, help bring awareness to causes that they care about, help make sure that they're protecting from the mental health of these people. There's been a lot of things that have come out about, people being stalked and or not being compensated properly for their content or being demonetized for some reason. What are your thoughts on the American Influencer Coalition here and how that's going to kind of progress and affect change.
Yeah, I mean, I see where they're coming from. It's not fun whenever you're doing things and at the whim. I mean, the company that could be paying you changes how they pay you and everything like that. But it's a big fight. I mean, these companies are huge. I mean, the U.S. is fighting for regulation and all that when it comes to these social media platforms. So, I mean, as much as they try, there's so much content being produced that it's easy for these big companies to say, cool, well, if you're part of this union or this lobbying group, whatever it may be, we'll find someone else that is willing to take a little bit less than you, and now they're getting compensated, and so it's like everything that you're fighting for might go to waste. And so, this might spark Congress or whatever to come together and really figure out how to handle social media platforms or just internet companies in general. But I mean, like I said, I think it's a very, very uphill battle. But I mean, what are your thoughts? Is this good? Do you think they'll make a breakthrough?
I mean, it comes down to how they execute on it. I mean, their website looks like it's from 1987 right now, so I am not super optimistic on that front. But I will say that the only people that really, really have leverage in terms of making change on these social media platforms is the influencers. It is not the businesses. We've seen that 400 businesses plus that are millions of dollars of budgets are pulling out of Facebook, and they're not worried about numbers tanking too much. They're just like, you'll come back to us. And so when it comes to influencers and the content creators, they have the most pull out of anybody. If they leave the platform, all their audiences that are there on that platform to watch that person's content are now going to be stuck going, well, let me follow that person. We're seeing a lot of affinity towards these specific creators. That's why we're seeing things like Patreon pop up, OnlyFans pop up. People want to subscribe to that creator. It's not really an affinity to the platform. And so it gives them leverage. And if they can be the ones to affect change and go, listen, if you don't make these policies, we're going to leave, then, I think it's an amazing thing to be brought to fruition.
Yeah. I mean, going back to our Twitch story and I think it was last week how we talked about Ninja. I mean, he left. You mentioned that people are following the creator, but he goes over to this other platform. Not everyone goes to follow because there's other creators, and so I think to your point, it's going to be them uniting. If you have people going out everywhere, you're going to be stretched thin and not going to make a difference. So
no, you're absolutely right there. You're absolutely right there.
Little win for me.
Oh, what? I don't know about that. Okay, so our next story, Lemonade. It's an insurance company that's come out and kind of gone against the grain a little bit. They are using AI to handle over 60% of their claims. It's a very low overhead business, and it's focused on really disrupting the insurance sector. And, if you weren't bought into it before the IPO, then you're probably bought into it now after seeing it rise over 139% in the first week. What are your thoughts on this? Are you bullish on this? Do you think that they can kind of disrupt the insurance industry?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the numbers, it's what they take care of. Even customer service requests, even if they can't handle it, it gets you 60% of the way there. I mean, I've worked in call centers. I've worked in support centers. There's not one person that goes, I love doing this. And so sure, it is going to take some jobs away, but it's not like there are, the jobs that people are waking up to and going, I can't wake up tomorrow and handle someone else that's irritated. But I mean, there is that aspect of it, the job loss. But I mean, I'll always go back to it. There's a lot of job loss during the Industrial Revolution, but there was also a lot more that were created, similar to what we're dealing with now, going to content creators. 10 years ago, there wasn't even a thing called content creators. Now you got 14-year-olds making millions of dollars, and so it'll create some not so fun situations for those people that'll lose their job and quickly realize that maybe it wasn't that bad, the job that you had, but it also create a lot of efficiencies which create opportunities.
Yeah, there's many less entrepreneurs than there are people that just want to have some stability and consistency is the problem, Dustin. And if you're firing all of these people, or your insurance companies that are hiring thousands and thousands of people, go ahead and clean staff out. Maybe you didn't like your job at the call center, but and maybe now you like your job more sitting at home getting unemployment. But that's why I think that there's going to be a shift in where unemployment just becomes universal basic income, because I don't see a scenario where businesses are so hungry to make money I mean, we were talking about this before. I'm not bought into the fact that with all of the unemployment that's happening, that businesses are going, let me make a foothold in the United States and hire people in the U.S. It seems like they're cash poor and they need the cheapest alternative, and so they'll outsource what they need to before they're incentivized to hire people in the U.S. So I just don't understand, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that, it's interesting. This is one of many companies that has come out and taken this model and brought it to life, and it just seems like it's kind of imminent that this is going to happen, where businesses are going to continue to want to be more profitable, and if AI does that for them, then they're going to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, if we see a huge avalanche of jobs, then it's just going to be up to lawmakers on how we can incentivize whether you give more money on hiring or there's some type of AI tax that companies get taxed, and then the tax dollars go towards unemployment or education.
Yep.
And that's where I think it should go. Education on how 100%. To leverage AI to make your life better or whatever it may be, and pass on that education so that you're doing something to create a future that someone loves doing and still an active or productive member of society.
Absolutely. Before we get into our next story, I just want to mention that we are partnered with State 48. Thank you guys, State 48. Amazing Arizona-based company. Have anything you want to mention about State 48?
Yeah, I mean, clothing for all, inspired by Arizona. They do very comfortable clothes, but they do a lot of collaborations where part of their profits go to various communities, go to various just helping the community in general. Yep. And so definitely check them out.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Cool. Going on to our next story. So buy now, pay whenever. So there's
I love it.
There's a new company called Afterpay that they're creating something that's pretty much like layaway, but it's not in the company's arms. They essentially do where you can pay for something and pay whenever you want, and essentially it's free to the consumer, but they're charging the merchant anywhere between 4 to 6% in order to make this happen. I'm all for giving people more options, but man, what's
the merchant charging to the consumer if
exactly.
They're paying 6%? Yeah,
exactly. And even after that, I mean, some of the bigger companies that they brought on, North Face and Sephora, I mean, to me, if you don't have the money to buy your mascara, maybe you shouldn't be taking on more debt for that makeup. I mean, it's
look
tough.
Good on social media with that Gucci bag.
So I mean, is this going to create more of a credit bubble? I mean, it'll generate some purchasing now, but now we're just creating a whole new credit line for consumers. And
I'm fired up about this because it's just this headline mongering society that we've created because of social media and the media, to where you're just reading the headline and doing whatever it is. Oh, that sounds too good to be true, but it's free. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And it's an afterthought of what the repercussions are, whether it's a PPP loan, whether it's unemployment, whether it's this, it's let me tell you all the benefits, hide all of the downfalls to it until you get that bill 6 months from now, that Gucci bag that cost $2,000 now costs $6,000. And it's like, you're never paying that back. I mean, if you can't afford it now, you're probably not going to be able to afford it then, especially when it's 3x the price. So to me, it's frustrating that companies are just jumping on this bandwagon of let me fool consumers into this trap just by misleading them and kind of being facetious about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's creating a big hole for consumers. I mean, most of our GDP is fueled by consumer spending, and that's what this helps do, but I don't think it should be done at the expense of debt. Spend if you have the cash, don't spend if it's going to bring on debt.
At the expense of uninformed consumers. Same way it's like acknowledge the terms and services so you can get on with your life. I know you're not going to read 100 pages. I see the same thing happening here where it's like, go ahead and just click that little box to sign your life away without knowing what it means. And then we'll catch you in 3 months when you have a fat bill that you didn't realize you were going to have. It's just like, I mean, yeah, uninformed consumers or people that don't have the money to buy this stuff, you probably shouldn't, but shame on the businesses that are like, buy it now, pay later.
And even then it's, this is nothing new. You could create, a whole layaway program. So, I mean, in terms of the companies, they're getting charged 4 to 6%. You could easily offer it yourself and offer something lower. This might take, cash flow away from you by bringing it in-house, but I think it can be deployed internally as well.
Yeah, we should be making